I was initially really skeptical of God of War Ragnarok. I mainly felt this way because when they initially announced God of War Ragnarok with this title screen trailer at a PlayStation event, they said it was scheduled for release in 2021. Now, I'm no mathematician, but according to my numbers, that would mean that they initially planned on having this game out within 3 years of the previous title's launch, which is a pretty quick turnaround in the modern day. I mean, most other major releases by Sony first-party studios take 4, 5, 6 years at a time. So I was not expecting there to be a lot here. I was expecting probably to just run around with Kratos and Atreus again, maybe with some new combat abilities and hopefully a few big boss fights, especially because I felt like God of War 2018 was lacking in a lot of big epic moments. At least when you compare it to the big moments that open and close off God of War 3, one of the most crazy games in terms of scale that I can personally think of. But fast forward to last week when PlayStation very generously sent me a review code for God of War Ragnarok the day before the embargo lifted, which is why I'm here making this video a few days after the fact, having played through the whole game, done a bunch of side stuff, taken my time with it. Now I'm gonna give you my full, unadulterated thoughts on the game, while of course making sure that I don't mention spoilers or anything like that. What I will let you know is that this game is absolutely crazy, and everything I thought this game was going to offer was certainly here, but there's also probably 4 to 5 times more stuff that I never even considered would be present in this game that's here. When I say Santa Monica Studio has been very busy, I mean it. They have been working their butts off, and the idea that this game was primarily built during COVID is just insane. I do want to quickly say be wary of the comment section before you go down there and start casually scrolling while you listen to the video. I have already seen in my impressions video at least a dozen comments that had legitimate, real spoilers for the ending of God of War Ragnarok. I delete them as quickly as I see them, but I can only do so much. I will also say there were probably 2 to 3 times that amount in fake comments claiming things happened in the story that just don't. And so there are real leaks, and then there's also fake leaks and spoilers. So just because you read something accidentally, it doesn't mean the game is necessarily spoiled for you. It could be somebody just messing around with you. But be warned, if you go through the comments, you're reading them at your own risk. Now, like I said, since the last video I've finished the game, I've done a bunch of side content, and I'm happy to report that the main game is probably around 30 hours long on most difficulty settings, and that's with a lot of side content having been played through as well. If you're playing through this game on the easiest possible, just give me story difficulty level, you'll probably be able to blast through the main story in somewhere between 18 and maybe 22 hours. Though let it be known, you should not do that. There is a lot here that is worth seeing in the side content. In fact, the real ending is locked behind a side quest that you do after the first edition of the credits roll when the story's over, so you're going to want to make sure to be keeping up with the side stuff as you go along. Now, I will also say, before we jump into the details, I will be showing some gameplay footage. I will be careful to avoid showing anything I consider to be a spoiler, and I will be closely following the guidelines that PlayStation and Santa Monica Studios sent me that carefully outline what should and should not be shown. So if you see anything on screen, I and the developers and the publisher think that it's okay for you to see it and it won't ruin the game, okay? Just be aware of that. This contains footage from the first 3 hours of the game, which I'll be using pretty freely. But in addition, I will also be showing off other parts of the game if they were shown off in trailers previously or they were present in the last game. For example, levels in Muspelheim. All told, you're going to see clips with Thor, Kratos, Atreus, Freya, some wolves and bears, and some light exploration and combat. I understand if you want to go on a media blackout and you don't want to see anything, that's totally fine. Just listen to the video. That being said, let's get into it. To talk about this, I'm going to break it down into 3 categories: the good, the bad, and the mid, as the kids say. I was going to say the meh, but apparently cool kids say mid now. I've seen it a lot in my comment sections. I had to Google what it means. Apparently it just means like, it's okay. So that's how I'm breaking it down. I feel like such a boomer. Now, to start out with the good stuff. Graphically, this game is really impressive. I know a lot of us were worried that this game would be held back by the PlayStation 4, which this game also releases on. All of the footage you're seeing on screen right now is from the PS5 version stuck on performance mode. My understanding is that the performance mode floats right around 1440p and tries to maintain 60 frames per second as a rule. The quality mode also will lock it at 4K, and then it'll try to get pretty much as high a frame rate as it can manage, but it's really up to you what you prefer, frame rate or fidelity, resolution, whatever, it's up to you. The options are there and the scaling is really good. I have not tried it on the base PS4 and I haven't seen anyone who has, mainly because the game looks so good on the PS5 that I don't feel justified in pulling my PS4 Slim out of storage. Maybe I'm just lazy. I don't know. If you guys would like me to like stream it on a base PS4 over on the Luke Stevens Live YouTube channel where we stream every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I would love to do that. Let me know in the comment section below. All of that said, the game looks tremendous, and there were multiple moments in cutscenes where I was actually taken aback at just how smooth everything appeared, and at the same time, how high quality the texture work is, especially on character models. Every single wrinkle and pore on Kratos' aged and tired face is clearly visible. Facial animation rigs have also seen a marked improvement, with cutscenes being much more realistic, for lack of a better term. The facial animations are just a lot improved over the base game. I will say there are multiple moments where the game doesn't transition into the cinematic mode and it just uses the gameplay facial rig for the discussions and dialogue that you have, and when that happens, it looks like total ass. The worst case I saw of this is right at the end of the game when you're going and walking up to people and there's some final dialogue happening. I would show it, but again, spoilers, so I'm not going to. All I know is that it looked so hilariously funny. It looks straight out of South Park with the Canadians, you know, just the mouths slapping open. It was bad. Maybe they'll fix it. Maybe that's a bug. I don't know. But that's the only time I notice it being particularly egregious. All told, it's an improvement. And it's not just the graphics that have been improved. The sound design is top notch, as you would expect, in addition to the music written by Bear McCreary being top notch. Also, yeah, the composer's in the game. He's like in the game. He like hands out a side quest. He's there at the end of the game. Like he actually is in the game. He's got a character model, a bunch of dialogue and all sorts of stuff. It was kind of fun. When I saw him, I was like, that's the guy from the Raising Kratos documentary. And sure enough, it's Bear McCreary. So, you know, keep an eye out for him. I won't show him here, but keep an eye out. The writing is also tremendous this time around, and I feel as though it's markedly better than in God of War 2018, though I would expect a lot of people to argue this point with me. To put it simply, God of War 2018 was a story about Kratos and Atreus. This game is about Kratos and Atreus, yes, but it's about them learning to trust each other, and that means trusting each other even with other people involved in those considerations. It's no longer about just them. Now Ragnarok is coming, and it's going to affect all 9 realms. Everybody is in danger. And that means that the cast is markedly larger than it was last time around, and it also means that there's less screen time to just focus on those two. I can see how some people would think that this is a net negative, but I actually see it as a net positive, especially because the secondary cast is utterly tremendous. I mean, everybody from Thor to Odin to some of the other characters, I'm not sure if I should say their names because it may or may not be a spoiler. I'm just not going to risk it. All of them are utterly tremendous. They're funny, they're witty, they're natural on screen, and frankly, some characters like Odin steal the show every time they come on screen. It's not even close. But more specifically, the dialogue is much more precisely written. As I mentioned in my preview, I think that it's actually a pretty funny game. There's a ton of one-liners and interesting stuff. I mentioned this part in the preview, but there's a secondary character who, when she sees Kratos for the first time, she turns to somebody to introduce her to him, and she goes, "You should introduce me to that tall glass of milk over there." And it's just funny because Kratos is white and blah, blah, blah. It's great. It's great. There's just a lot of moments like that which are just kind of funny. And it actually took me back to like The Witcher 3 when people call Geralt puss peepers and stuff like that. It's a fun little detail, and it makes the game feel more real and alive. It's just a great addition. And thankfully, it's actually balanced out with some darkness and depth as well. It's not all laughs and frills here. Ragnarok is coming, and a lot of people will die. It will be messy, bloody, and horrible for a lot of people, but it needs to happen, and there's a bunch of things that push it into existence. And I really like this. I felt like the last time around, the stakes were fairly low. They were high for Kratos and Atreus, But even the last fight with Baldur and Freya at the end of God of War 2018 didn't feel as though it was super high stakes, because it was not even really your fight. It was more Baldur's fight with Freya that you just were kind of there for, and you're just like third wheeling along. It felt just weird. This game is all about Ragnarok. It's all about Kratos and Atreus trying to find their destiny within that story, having, of course, seen some prophecies at the end of the last game, which color this whole journey. It's great, and I love it dearly. I will also say the pacing is better than expected. It's not easy to tell a 30-hour story and make it feel fresh all the way through, but they somehow manage it here. I never felt as though I'd hit a wall in my gameplay or like, oh my god, just get to the point. I never felt like that. The game always clipped along at a healthy pace, and when the ending came, it felt natural, like everything had just built up to this point and then the bubble burst. But there were also a couple of things that I had problems with, and I'm going to discuss these, even though maybe like the proper thing to do if I'm just trying to hype you guys up for the game would be to be like, oh, it's great. Anyway, subscribe and just call the video here. But there are problems in this game that I'm going to break down in detail in the critique when that eventually comes out. But I do think you should be aware of these things. Without a doubt, the worst thing in this game that gets somehow worse as time goes on is the freaking compass. This is the omnipresent piece of UI that sticks on the screen and guides you to objectives. Being a compass, its primary goal is to point you in one or two primary directions based on your set objective. So let's say I need to go over here and talk to Brock and Sindri. I mark that on the map. Cool. So that compass is going to put that point on the compass and it will guide me there, and I can move left and right. I can look for the best path to it, but it'll tell me where north, south, east, west I need to go for that point, right? Nope. How it works is that you mark the objective on your map, and then this compass changes what it tells you based on where the closest waypoint is on the way to that objective. The best way I can explain this is with MS Paint. This is the player here, X. This is our objective over here, Y. You would think that if you set the objective on your compass to Y, what you would see on the compass is just like this thing. Maybe say this is east, so you would see east outlined, and then the objective Y is there, right there next to it. You just head in that direction onto the point where you're headed, right? You see, each of the levels designed in this game are very, very crisscrossy and complicated. And because of this, the game designers didn't feel like they needed to just point you in one direction, because that might get confusing. Because as you explore, you'll walk through this hallway, and even though you need to turn left and go up this hallway here, the compass objective would still be pointing in this way to Y to tell you to go that direction. They don't want to do that. So instead what they did is they set up a bunch of these little points on the map, which are like waypoints at each of the choke points on your adventure. And what the compass does is it points you to the next choke point instead of to the objective. So what happens is, as you're running along, your objective marker on the compass will constantly change to the next waypoint. So you see here, we run up to this point here. Now the objective is due east. So we would see the east marker and the objective told right there. Okay, so it's to the east. So we run over there. But once we reach this point, the objective marker will move and tell us now we need to go due south to hit the next waypoint. So this will go away, and then south will appear over here, and it'll tell us to go over there to get to our objective. And it constantly does this. And I know what you're thinking, maybe this just isn't a big deal. Like, don't all games work like this? Well, no, most compasses just point you in the direction, and it's up to you to figure out where to go. Because the reason game designers put compasses in the game instead of mini-maps is because they don't want you staring at the mini-map when you could be looking at the game world and exploring that way. What this does is it just makes the compass so annoying and confusing to use that you'll end up staring at that far more than you would stare at a regular minimap. A lot of you guys probably felt this thing in God of War 2018 because it was a problem back then as well, but because the maps are bigger and more meandering this time around, it is extremely frustrating to use the compass in any way, shape, or form. It's like honestly so terrible. I was wondering if I had like some bug going on where the waypoints are shifting constantly, because I would walk literally maybe 2-3 meters front and back. And in the span of that one movement, I would have the waypoint bounce all around the compass telling me to go in different directions. I thought it was broken. No, that it's not a bug, it's a feature. That's how they designed it, and it's not good. So that's my number one issue, and it's omnipresent through the game. You can't get rid of it, and it sucks ass. The next actual problem I have with the game are with soft locks. This is something I've communicated to Santa Monica Studio and my contact over at PlayStation. They are aware of these soft locks and are hopefully working on fixes. But I ran into these problems even with the day one patch that players like you will be playing with. So just know this is what you will get on day one. You will still deal with these issues, potentially if you have luck like mine. Now, showing these is a little bit tricky because they happen during gameplay sequences, one of which is at the very end of the game and is actually like the last side quest before the true ending happens. So I can't show you that. Basically, a soft lock occurred and I just stood around for like 2-3 minutes waiting for this big thing to happen that was supposed to happen, and it never did. I forced a reload to the previous checkpoint and realized that a character who has dialogue to trigger that event never spawned. And so we all just stood around doing nothing. And the second soft lock I ran into was similar to this, except it was with a puzzle. I needed a thing to happen, an event to trigger in order for me to be able to continue through the puzzle, lift this elevator and carry on to the next zone. But that thing never triggered. And I stood around thinking I just was stupid and didn't understand the puzzle for a solid 5 minutes or so until I finally thought something just isn't right. It can't be this complicated. So I reloaded. Sure enough, immediately it fixes itself and we continue along the way. These soft locks suck. They're unfortunate. Luckily, the checkpoint system is really robust. So I never really found myself losing like 10, 20, 30 minutes of progress. But it's still annoying, especially during puzzles when you feel like there's some answer you just aren't getting. So you keep going back and trying things again and again and again. When there's bugs that prevent you from progressing, it feels unfair and it makes you call into question every moment you might hesitate on a puzzle. Is it a bug or do I just not get it yet? I don't know. Let me try reloading just in case. No, okay, still didn't fix it. Maybe it's a really bad bug, or maybe I still don't get it. It calls into question the whole premise of puzzle solving in these kinds of games, and it just really sucks. So I really hope that they fix these issues soon, and hopefully when you play the game you don't run into these things. But if you do, just remember sometimes if it seems like the answer is just too obscure, it might just be a bug. Try refreshing to the last checkpoint and you might be pleasantly surprised when your problems solve themselves. Now let's talk about some mid stuff. See, mid, like mid guard. Ooh, I didn't plan that. Mid stuff that's meh. As I mentioned in my impressions, the puzzles I find really just tedious. These things are all throughout the game, and it's how they pad out different gameplay sections. I understand these are a necessary part of games nowadays. I mean, frankly, you need something other than just combat and cutscenes and dialogue. So it makes sense that they throw these types of navigation, exploration, puzzle solving things into the game. I like the variability, but I would insist that these puzzles never get really complicated. They're just tedious. You know what you have to do. You just run to the point, do the thing, and then run to the other point, do the other thing. It never feels as though you're actually pausing to be like, what's going on here? And when you are doing that, sometimes it's a soft lock and you already figured out the puzzle. It's just broken. But I'll be honest, that's more of a personal preference. That's not something I can easily quantify or argue clearly. The thing I think I can make a clear point for is the compass, and that's part of the reason navigation also feels kind of meh this time around as well. It was an issue I had in God of War 2018, and it's an issue that's still present here. It just feels like sometimes you're wrestling with the navigation and directional systems to tell you where to go, and sometimes it's just faster to pull up your map, be like, okay, north, and then just drive north, ignore the compass that's on your screen because it's so not useful. You would rather just use the map. I mean, I guess I could say that the compass is useless, but it's actually like worse than useless because following it too closely will just actively confuse you. So it's like a compass that points you in the wrong direction constantly. Now, one of the other things that's kind of meh is the gear system. It's largely unchanged from the first game. There's of course a few new bits and bops here and there, an amulet that you can put a bunch of sort of rune type things into in order to boost different capabilities abilities and powers. Armor and gear have set bonuses and all sorts of fun stuff like that. But to be perfectly honest, it didn't feel as fun to engage with this time around as at least I remember it being last time around. You see, in the last 2 games, there have been 4 major playstyles for a player to choose from: strength or damage and DPS prioritization, runic and cooldown loadouts, defense and vitality loadouts, or luck buildouts. You could mix and match each of these somewhat, but if you wanted to min-max, you had to pick one of those 4 overarching playstyles based on how you like to tackle combat. And the thing is, once you've decided which of these you want to prioritize in terms of playstyle, there's only 1 or 2 armor sets in the entire game that make any damn sense to use. You guys will see in the critique when I can show you all of my gameplay, including the later game sections, but I largely only used 2 different armor sets for my entire time with the game. Around 10 hours in, I acquired an armor set that was really good for maximizing damage at the cost of having really low vitality, so high risk, high reward kind of thing. And then I finished the game out with an armor set that looked badass for one, and also was very, very good at boosting luck, which affects everything from crit damage and likelihood and percentages to cooldown timings, everything else. Now, as I've said before, this game, to get through the main story, around 30 hours. I would easily expect another 20 to 30 hours of content doing all of the side stuff, grinding things out, and max leveling Kratos before starting on New Game Plus. I haven't done that yet. I want to. We'll do it on stream live over at Luke Stevens Live here on YouTube. But as of right now, having finished the main story and done a handful of hours after that, just exploring and completing side content, I feel as though the armor I'm using and that I was using at the end of the game is perfectly fine. A lot of it's because it can be leveled up and upgraded even after the game technically finishes. So you can just upgrade it indefinitely if you really, really like that loadout. But the downside of that is it doesn't encourage any variability or experimentation on the part of the player. You're probably going to pick the armor set that you like and just stick to it for the majority of the run. But you know, it could just be that I recently played through God of War 2018 over on stream, and as a result of playing through that on the hardest available difficulty, I just feel overly familiar with this stuff. So I wasn't experimenting because very quickly I knew what I wanted to do. Maybe that's it. And it does tie into the next mid element, which is more broadly the combat difficulty. Not to sound like a tryhard, but I really feel like this game is too easy on the recommended balanced difficulty. I don't know how to describe it other than that I went through this game, I never felt excessively challenged, and I never felt as though I needed to go off and grind and do stuff to level up my gear to get better and more powerful. I just kind of waltzed through the game, and it felt good, it felt solid, but it felt like it was really lacking any challenge or difficulty, which was a little disappointing considering how many more boss fights there are in this game. I mean, in the first maybe 10, 15 hours, there are easily over a dozen bosses that you will fight that range from huge set piece bosses to smaller bosses you encounter in side content. But with all of it, I would go through the fight and maybe die once because I started the fight with almost no health. But then when you reload, you get max health filled out completely, and then you try again and you kick their butt after seeing all of their moves. It just felt as though it was a walk in the park. And that's why, ladies and gentlemen, over on Luke Stevens Live, we'll be playing through God of War Ragnarok on launch day on Give Me God of War. So if you want to see me utterly miserable and eat my words on this game being too easy, then you should definitely come over, subscribe to Luke Stevens Live again here on YouTube, and hang out with us because it's going to be a lot of fun. Now, the one time I didn't mind this game feeling overly easy was specifically at the end during the final sequences with the last few bosses that you fight, kind of all in succession in a row. The final boss fight lasts probably for most people around 20 minutes of different versions and different waves and things going on. And I didn't die once during that whole thing, which initially I was like, so it was too easy. But then I thought about it, and I actually prefer this to there just being a crushingly difficult final boss, because with a narrative game like this, having an overly difficult final boss or boss in any sort of story beat moment is not actually a net positive because it ruins the pacing. It pulls the player out of the story a lot of the time and just makes them frustrated with the gameplay. And to be honest, I mean, this is what New Game Plus is for. Like, you go through the story, you feel all the story beats, you get the emotional hit from it. And then if you want to go through these fights again with a real challenge, you can do that on New Game Plus, or go through from the start again, but on Give Me God of War. That's what secondary playthroughs are for. So it might not actually be that bad of a thing. And maybe as I describe this to you now, you're thinking, okay, well, I don't want to struggle against bosses while I go through the game, so I'll just go through on balanced or on easy or whatever. That's totally fine. There's nothing wrong with you if you want to do that. I'm just explaining from my personal perspective. Having come off of God of War 2018 recently, I felt that there was a marked lack of challenge. But all in all, the game is tremendous, and it's everything I wanted it to be. I wanted God of War 2018 to be sort of a return to form for the franchise and to just be epic and crazy and big, and they didn't do that, and instead the game was much more tight in focus and mostly centered around Kratos and Atreus's relationship, which I think was a good decision. And coming into God of War Ragnarok now, I can see that it completes the story arc that was started in that first game, and it does so beautifully. And before anybody asks, no, there are no signs that I've seen that hint at what the next game is going to be. There were people saying, oh, there's a video that leaked of Kratos looking at the pyramids. It's fake. There's nothing like that here that I've seen. I've even seen the true ending where like the screen fades to black for the first and only time in the entire game's runtime. I've seen all those endings, and I still have yet to see anything that would point me in the direction of what the next game is going to bring to the table. I don't know, maybe there is something in here that I'll discover as I continue to play or go through on New Game Plus or something. But as of right now, I don't know if they have an idea yet of what they're doing next. I really don't know. It's probably going to be a good long while though before they go back to God of War, because allegedly Santa Monica Studio is working on a new IP after this. So we might not be getting another God of War until like the PlayStation 6, which is it's a little insane, but luckily this game is so tremendous. I think I'm willing to wait that long, because whatever they do to top this will be truly incredible. But with that, I'm gonna call it there and get some sleep, because I've been playing God of War Ragnarok like nonstop for like 3-4 days, and my wife is angry at me. So I'm gonna go hang out with my wife and my little 1-year-old son and relax and reflect on what this experience has brought me, because the story in this game and everything it has to offer really is tremendous, and it's something that's gonna stick with me, and I'm sure stick with you for a very, very long time. But that's all from me. Much love. I'll see you over on Luke Stevens Live here on YouTube. If you just search in the search bar, Luke Stevens Live will pop up. Again, we're live every Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I will look forward to seeing you guys over there. And until then, much love. I'll see you in the next one. Hugs and kisses. Bye-bye.